My husband and I planned to celebrate our first anniversary at home, but when I was about to invite my mom, husband grabbed the phone me and said she can't come since she could possibly steal, as she is broke and desperate. I said nothing at that moment, but at the party a week later, I make this speech exposing my husband and my in-laws in front of all their guests before bringing out my mom and leave them red in the face. My husband Ethan, 27 male, and I, 26 female, celebrated our first anniversary and it didn't go well, and right now, we are heading towards divorce because of my behavior, apparently. Ethan and I have been together for the past 5 years and married for one, as I mentioned. We haven't had any major fights, but I have picked up on the fact that he's been a little reluctant to spend time with my family. So far, he kept telling me it was only because he's a generally shy person and that he needed time to open up to other people. And in the beginning, I even believed it, but then, after we had been together for almost 4 years and my parents always treated him like their own son, I couldn't understand why he was still so weird and closed off around them. I literally never thought that it could have possibly been because of the reasons that I found out about recently. That my parents had never been very well off and often borrowed money from me. So that's why he apparently felt uneasy around them, because he used to believe that he would be asked to contribute. Of course, that had never happened. My parents only relied on me for money, and I was glad to help them out because in spite of their financial restraints, they had brought me up to the best of their abilities, and I didn't mind having to help them out financially now. Actually, my dad's parents passed away when he was really young, and he was raised by his relatives and passed around quite a lot because nobody was willing to look after him for long. And then finally, he ended up with his great uncle in his teens. He was not interested in raising my father at all and mostly just let him be on his own, taking care of the minor expenses and leaving him to look after the rest. So my dad had to work part-time jobs and stuff. And after he graduated from high school, he didn't bother with college because he couldn't afford it, and also, he didn't think it was necessary. He started working at the supermarket, and that's where he met my mom, since she had also lost both parents a while ago and had been staying with her aunt who treated her like a burden. They got along well because of their life stories, which are so similar, and they started dating. And as they say, the rest is history. Throughout their lives, they took a lot of jobs and sometimes even worked 2 jobs after I was born, just so that they would be able to keep the household running, and it was difficult. But in the end, at least they were able to lead respectable lives and give me the kind of upbringing that I had. So I'm more than grateful to them because I'm doing pretty well now, and I don't think there's anything wrong with me helping them out because, unfortunately, my parents haven't exactly been lucky in the past couple of years. 3 years back, my dad started falling really sick. And after a couple of visits to the doctors, he was diagnosed with stomach cancer. And a couple of months ago, we lost him after a really long drawn battle. We did our best when it came to his treatments and took him to the best hospitals and the doctors, but unfortunately, we couldn't save him. My mom almost spent their entire retirement fund because in spite of the medical insurance, there was still a lot of stuff that we had to pay out of pocket for. My parents and I did our best, and that's the only thing that we can reassure ourselves with, that at least we try to ease his suffering as much as we could regardless of the outcome. Of course, now he's taking its toll because my mom is kind of struggling with money, and I really don't want her to go back to working 2 jobs because of her age and also because of the fact that she's recently lost the love of her life. So I've been supporting her. Nothing wrong with that. And pretty much the only reason I decided to have a huge party to celebrate my first wedding anniversary and invite a lot of people was because I wanted to invite my mom and have an evening of distraction and fun so she could just let loose for a day. Last week, I told Ethan to send out invitations and he had, but I wanted to double-check everything. So I decided to go through the emails he had sent to check whether everybody we wanted at the party had received an invitation or not. And strangely enough, I noticed that my mom hadn't received any emails. I found that weird, but I figured that he must have forgotten, so I didn't say anything about it. And I was about to call my mom after telling him that she hadn't received an email and I was going to talk to her anyway, so I'd much rather just do it on call. When I said that, he literally came sprinting towards me, grabbed the phone from me and told me that I couldn't do it. I was obviously baffled by this behavior and a little annoyed because, of course, I wanted to invite my mom to my first wedding anniversary party, and I couldn't think of a single reason why he wouldn't allow me to do that. When he did that, I also realized that he had probably skipped my mother while sending out the invitations on purpose, and I found that very insulting. So I demanded an explanation from him, and he told me that he didn't want to bring this up with me. But now that it had come to this, he felt like he had to tell me that he didn't think it would be safe to invite my mother because she was desperate and broke right now, and she could possibly steal stuff. I was so stunned that I couldn't even bring myself to say anything at that moment because it was so humiliating to hear that. He went on to tell me that he had had an issue with my parents constantly borrowing money from me ever since we had been together anyway. And the fact that they would do it right in front of him without caring about how it would appear, it would just make him feel very uncomfortable. And that's when he also told me that this is not how he had been raised. which is obviously true because he comes from a relatively comfortable family. And while his parents had never exactly been wealthy, at least they were comparatively better off. Anyway, given the fact that he had never been comfortable talking about money so publicly, he found my parents' behavior very odd and started maintaining his distance from them because he believed that once he got too close to them, they would not feel uncomfortable asking him for money either. It was ridiculous because the only reason they ever asked me for money was because I was well aware of their conditions. I knew how they had struggled through life and I actually wanted to contribute and support them somehow. That was not the case with Ethan. They knew that my parents were not heathens and they obviously had enough manners to not ask him for money. And even if they did, he wouldn't have to contribute or support them anyhow because I was enough. It was a baseless fear that he had and I thought it was quite insensitive of him to bring it up with me when I had just recently lost my father. Obviously, on top of that, there was the fact that he had already said that my mom might steal something from us because she was broke and desperate right now. He had literally decided not to have her at the party because of something like that and I could not believe that he was acting so paranoid over something like this. My mom is going through a hard time financially right now, but I'm there for her and I think the entire basis of his fears is so ridiculous that I can't even talk about it without feeling angry. Already he didn't particularly like my parents and apparently he made that comment about my mom because a couple of weeks before the incident we had been having dinner at her place. And she had asked me to transfer some money to her and had joked about how times were getting so tough that she was considering becoming a con artist somehow. Obviously, that was a sarcastic joke that she thought she was making in front of her daughter and son-in-law who were not even going to judge her, but she had clearly been wrong about Ethan. He had already judged my parents and he had decided that he did not want them in his life. For a couple of years, he had managed to put up with them, but I guess now he no longer wanted to do that. So now he was trying to brainwash me against my parents and he was telling me that their behavior was unacceptable and they couldn't constantly rely on me for money because I did not owe it to them. He even went on to say that he was very sorry that my dad had passed away, but in reality he was no different from my mom and the two of them would constantly make me feel guilty and force me to send money to them instead of just taking care of themselves and handling their finances on their own. He told me that I did not even realize that I was being used because that's what I was accustomed to. But he could see that I was being mistreated by my parents and now it was finally time to cut them out of my life. And then he dropped another bombshell on me and told me that even when he spoke to his parents about it, my in-laws believed that my parents did not have any right to guilt-trip me into sending them money every time and that it was pathetic of them to manipulate me like this. At that point, it became clear that even my in-laws had a part to play in this, no matter how sweetly they behaved with me and my parents, but whatever. It was all just a bunch of BS that nobody apart from him and his family believed. And while he was talking, I did not even bother to defend my parents because I knew whatever was going to happen. I just let him talk, and I pretended that I was totally on board with whatever he was saying. At that point in time, there was just 1 week to go before the party and I was fuming on the inside. And I decided that whatever I had to say to him, I would say to another party in front of everybody. And I would let him know exactly how proud I was of my parents for having raised me the way that they did in spite of limited resources. At least my parents, regardless of their financial situation, had always taught me to respect people, and it was obvious that my in-laws and my husband had never learned that, because if they had, they would get to see exactly why I helped my parents out and why they accepted it. It was not because I was obliged to do so or because I'd been emotionally manipulated into it. It was just because my parents and I had a wonderful relationship and I wanted to help them out. They had no qualms about accepting my help either because they loved me and knew I was doing well for myself, so they did not let their ego get in the way of accepting whatever I did for them. If people have a problem with something like this, that's on them. Anyway, for 1 week, I pretended that everything was fine and that I could totally understand why Ethan did not want my mom at the party. But behind his back, I was ready to expose him and his parents at the party. And last evening, I did exactly that. When the party was in full swing and pretty much everybody had arrived, I asked my mom to come over, let her into the house from the kitchen door, and led her to the living room. When my in-laws and Ethan noticed that my mom was there, they called me aside to confront me about it. But I didn't pay any attention to them. Instead, I started to propose a toast and at the beginning, I just shared how grateful I was to have Ethan in my life. But then I started talking about how I had started regretting my marriage altogether recently because of something that had happened while we were sending out invitations to this party. Then I explained everything to the guests present and people did not look too happy about it because, obviously, the comments made about my parents were disgusting, especially considering the fact that my dad had recently passed away. I could see my in-laws and Ethan going red in the face because pretty much everybody else was either trying not to look at them or shooting them disgusted looks. And when I realized that I had done what I had set out to, I told everybody at the party that Ethan and his parents were never going to be more important to me than my mom. Then I grabbed her hand and I walked out with her. And when we were in the car, She sobbed with me because of what I had done. And I have no regrets about any of it. Last evening, whatever I had done was very dramatic and theatrical, but that's exactly what I had intended to do. Because of the betrayal that I had been feeling for the past week, it had to take form in some way, and this is what I chose to do. I'm staying with my mom currently, and I've decided that I'm going to speak to a lawyer soon so we can start the divorce proceedings since obviously there's no going back after all that happened last evening. My mom didn't have much to say except how grateful she was, but I had been feeling really good about last evening. However, this morning, I received an email from Ethan, and I still don't regret what I did, but I'm beginning to question if it was the right thing to do or not. I'll just paste the whole thing here because I'm too tired to try and shorten it. You guys can skim through it if you want. I'm really disappointed with the way you chose to deal with this whole situation in spite of having been with me for so many years. I think the least that we could have done for each other was to be honest. I tried not to talk to you about how I felt about your parents and them constantly relying on you for financial help because I knew that it was going to hurt you. But I don't understand why you couldn't speak to me if you were not happy with what I had said. If you disagreed with whatever I believe, you could have just explained to me that you like being there for your parents and helping them out, and they are not exploiting you. That's all you needed to say to me, and I would have understood, and I never would have brought this up again. I simply cannot understand why you felt the need to go through 1 week of acting like everything was fine and then dropping this whole thing on us. You have not only humiliated me, you have also humiliated my parents. And the worst part is that you didn't even think that it was important to try and give our relationship a fighting chance. I don't understand why you couldn't just speak to me, and that's what I keep thinking about. I haven't been able to sleep the entire night, and I don't even know if you're going to read this email, but I had to send it to you. I know that we're going to head for a divorce now. I really don't think that either of us can bounce back from something like this, but I just wanted to know if you had spoken to me once and if you had tried to explain your side of things to me, I would have understood. I really would have, and I never would have interfered with your relationship with your mom ever again. For so many years I have only loved you and I tried to do right by you, and I know that somewhere along the line I might have messed up, but what you did last evening was irreversible. I really wish that we could have worked things out by just talking to each other, and I'm always going to regret the fact that I didn't tell you how I felt about your parents in the beginning. But I think you need to know that you could have spoken to me as well instead of creating so much drama, and that would have saved our marriage. It takes two to tango, and that's all I have to say. I love you and I hate that this is going to end like this, but you've left me with no choice. This is what he sent me in the morning, and as you guys can see, it left me with a lot of things to think about. So now I'm wondering if I actually did the right thing or not. AITA for not being honest with my husband about my feelings and instead humiliating him and his parents at our first anniversary party. Update 1. Hi. Thank you for all the comments and support. I needed that. It's been a week since the party, and I spoke to my mom the day after I made that post. I didn't want to tell her anything about it because I knew that she was still pretty upset since she had found out at the same time as everybody else. Obviously, when I had asked her to come to the party and walk through the kitchen door, she had guessed that there was something weird about this situation, but she hadn't expected that Ethan and his parents would have such a low opinion of her, thinking that she might even steal, and it had really hurt her. So I didn't want to talk to her about Ethan and his parents and make her more upset, but then I realized that she was the only person that I wanted to discuss this with, and her opinion always matters to me. So I spoke to her and she told me that while Ethan did have a point, it was frankly up to me what I wanted to do. If I genuinely believed that whatever he had said was so horrible that I didn't even want to question it or dignify it with a justification, and I just wanted to humiliate him back and get revenge somehow, then it was my call to make. He had his perspective. I had mine. Then she told me very realistically it didn't matter if he was right or not, because at the end of the day, whatever had happened had damaged our relationship to the point of no repair. That was something that both he and I could agree upon, so my mom told me that there was no point learning about whether I was right or wrong because, ultimately, I did what I thought was right and that was it. And I think that's a pretty good way to look at the situation because I'm not doing anybody any favors by rethinking my decisions after I've already done what I had to do. So after receiving that email, I did not reply to Ethan because there was no point. Even if I did do the wrong thing, it didn't matter because we were getting divorced and that was it. I've spoken to a lawyer and we have filed the papers, and in a couple of days, I think he's going to be served. Nobody from his family has tried to reach out to me for the past couple of days, and I think his parents have either blocked me on social media or maybe just deactivated their accounts. He hasn't done that yet, but I can tell that he's going to do it soon. He has taken down all the photos of our wedding and stuff, though, and has also taken down whatever pictures we had with each other on his feed. So that's a start, I guess. I spoke to a couple of friends who had been there at the party and asked them what had happened after I had walked out with my mom. They told me it had been totally chaotic after that because his relatives started telling him off about his behavior, and most people from his family either walked out just after us or stayed to express how disappointed they were in Ethan and his parents. I found that very sweet of them because it's not like I'm very close to his family, but even they can see that whatever Ethan and his parents had said about my family was not right, and I think I'm gonna thank them for it sometime in the future. Not right now because I have a lot of other things to deal with as well, and also because I don't want to act like I'm trying to turn them against Ethan and his parents altogether. My friends couldn't tell me much though because after a while, they left because they didn't want to get caught up in the drama. But most of them are on my side, even though some of them do think that what I did was a bit excessive. They haven't villainized me for it though because they understand that I must have felt very betrayed and they can't exactly put themselves in my shoes. So the least they can do is always be there for me because I love Ethan too. And it's going to be very hard for me to let this marriage go. I haven't asked anybody to pick sides or whatever because I think that's very high school and also because I'm pretty sure that it would just make me look like the bad guy. I know for a fact that my friends have been in touch with Ethan as well, and I don't really mind it as long as it doesn't get in the way of my relationships with these people. So far, he's been quite civil and hasn't had a single negative thing to say about me, even though he could have totally gone out of his way to talk crap about me to everybody else. But I'm glad that he's being respectful and trying to treat this with as much dignity as he can because that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I think as long as we maintain this, we will be able to get through the divorce without much drama. I think my terms have been fair enough, and I hope that he will find them acceptable when he is finally served. Because, honestly, I just want to move on from that chapter of my life, and I can't properly start until the divorce is finalized. Luckily, we have a relatively shorter waiting period in our state, and hopefully, he won't contest it. And we'll wrap this up quickly. Update 2. So 5 days have passed since my last update. Ethan was served with the divorce papers a couple of days ago. And today, my lawyer heard back from him. And thankfully, he is not going to be contesting the terms. So we just need to wait for 90 days, and then we'll be able to finalize the divorce. Now that it's finally happening, it's really hitting me that I'm going to leave this man, and I don't know how I feel about that. Obviously, I feel like this had to happen because of whatever took place at the party, and I'm aware of that. But then again, emotionally, I'm just so lost and drained. I know I'm gonna have to see him again because when I left, I didn't pack any of my things. And for now, I've been relying on my mom, but I can't do that forever. I'm gonna need to bring my stuff over, and for that I'm gonna have to go back home and collect my things. So I've texted him that I'm gonna need to do that, and I'm hoping that he won't be home at the time that I show up. But I don't know when I'm gonna be over because he hasn't replied to my message yet, even though it's been 2 days. I've kept in touch with my friends, and they have told me that even though he had been speaking to them normally for a couple of days after the incident recently, he has completely been freezing them out. And they think that it's because of me, because he thinks that they have kept in touch with me, and he doesn't want me to find out anything about how he's doing or what he's up to. I feel weird about that, but, honestly, I can't blame him because I don't think that I would be fine with my friends going and telling him anything about me at this point either. Even if it's something innocent or harmless, I still wouldn't want it, and I respect his decision. The only saving grace of this entire situation has been the fact that I have been able to spend more time with my mom than usual, and we talk a lot, mostly about my dad and how much we miss him. We lost him before time, and that's for sure, because he was still pretty young. We lost him before time, that's for sure, because he was still pretty young and only in his early 50s. And even though it has been several months since his passing, I don't think either of us has gotten over it. And we had been trying to suppress it all, trying to move on with our lives, but we hadn't fully processed it. So that's what we are doing now, trying to process and heal from that because that's probably what Dad would have wanted us to do. I've tried to get my mom to consider therapy, but she thinks it's a waste of money. So we just talk about him, try to keep him alive in our memories and spend as much time as we can together. It's going to get better with time, but right now, this is all we can do to keep our minds off of everything. Update 3. Hey, so a couple of hours earlier this evening, I went over to Ethan's house and collected my stuff so I could move in with my mom on a more long-term basis. It's been 7 days since my last update, and even though he did not respond to the message that I had sent him for a couple of days, he finally replied the day before yesterday and told me that I could come over after his work hours and collect everything. So a friend of mine and I went over with his pickup truck. He helped me pack and move, and I have to say everything was really awkward. Ethan just stood around while we were working, and after about an hour, when I was finally done, he told me that he was ending his lease on our house and moving away in a couple of weeks. Apparently, he had decided that he was going to move to the suburbs for a change of scenery, and he told me that I could come back in the next few days before his move in case I had left anything behind because, obviously, after he leaves, I wouldn't be able to come back to this place. It came as a bit of a shock initially, but then I just wished him the best for his future. I felt really weird. I didn't know what to say to him, so we just ended up shaking hands and then I walked away. It wasn't necessarily an emotional parting, but even then I ended up crying for half an hour when I finally came back home. And I don't know. It was just weird. My mom consoled me and told me that it was all going to be fine, and I really hoped that it would be because all things said and done, I knew I was going to miss him. I've loved Ethan for a really long time, and honestly, there was a point in my life when I could not imagine living without him. But now I'm going to have to do that. It's going to be hard, I know that, but it has to be done. That's what I keep telling myself, and I guess I'll never know if things might have turned out differently had I not pulled off that stunt at the party. But I know there's no point fixating on that now because it's only going to hurt. At the end of the day, I chose my family and my dignity over him. And no matter what, I don't think that's something that I'm going to regret because of all the people that I've ever known. It's only my parents who have always been there by my side.